We have to open our country. You know, I've said it often, the cure cannot be worse than the problem itself.
Anyone who's responsible for that many deaths should not remain as President of the United States of America.
U.S. President Donald Trump and rival Joe Biden clash over the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic in their final debate. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. U.S. President Donald Trump and Democratic challenger Joe Biden are back on the campaign trail, hoping to gain momentum for their last debate. The two men debated each other on a number of issues in Nashville, Tennessee, challenging each other's views on COVID-19, immigration, and racial disparities in the United States. CGTN's White House correspondent Nathan King joins us now. Nathan, a lot of attention was given to the coronavirus pandemic. How did President Trump address criticism that he's actually bungled the handling of the pandemic?
Well, you know, ever since that he's actually recovered from COVID himself, he has essentially used himself as a metaphor, a phoenix rising from the ashes, not just the U.S. president himself, but of course the U.S. economy, and that the U.S. population can also get over it too. It's a positive message. He needs one going into the election. You understand it, but the figures, unfortunately, 72,000 was it new cases, 800 and something deaths in the last 24 hours tend to be against it. And the unfortunate thing, I think, for the US president is that he tends to not empathize with people when it comes to this. Just witness this exchange between the two candidates.
We're learning to live with it. We have no choice. We can't lock ourselves up in a basement like Joe does. He has the ability to lock himself up. I don't know. He's obviously made a lot of money someplace, but he has this thing about living in a basement. People can't do that.
He says that we're learning to live with it. People are learning to die with it. You folks home will have an empty chair at the kitchen table this morning. That man or wife going to bed tonight and reaching over to try to touch their, out of habit, where their wife or husband was, is gone. Learning to live with it. Come on. We're dying with it.
Yeah, I think that was definitely one of former Vice President Joe Biden's best responses of the night. It was a much, much better debate for the U.S. president. He was coherent. He got in good attack lines. He was much, much stronger than the first debate, which, of course, as we all know, was a train wreck. Second one cancelled because of concerns over his COVID diagnosis. So it was really a case of third time lucky for the U.S. president. The question is, of course, will it make a difference?
Right, that is the question. Nathan, looking at the conduct of the debate, of course, it was a lot easier to watch. But did the needle really move for either candidate? Were there any kind of memorable moments?
Yeah, I mean, there were lots of them. And actually, you know, U.S. President Trump really landed some stuff on President Biden. I mean, the confusion over his energy policy when it came to fracking and oil. I mean, they've been cleaning that up with a Biden campaign all afternoon across the United States. It could hit him potentially in Pennsylvania, Texas, if he's so ambitious as to think he can win that, although the polls are very close. So we'll wait and see. And I think the U.S. president also tried to paint Joe Biden out as just a regular politician who'd been in Washington, D.C. for decades and hadn't done anything. Now, whether that's true or not, that's not a bad line. But 11 days out, 12 days out from the election, perhaps it should have come sooner. Now, Joe Biden did not fail in this debate. He did wobble a couple of times, but he got in some very good lines. One I thought was very interesting is when the U.S. president tried to go after Joe Biden and his family and the potential story that we've seen swirling for the last 10 days about his son and Russia and China. Joe Biden just pivoted and said, look, I've never taken any money from anyone. I've released my tax returns. Where's your tax returns? You've got a secret bank account in China. It was very, very effective in sort of being able to turn the tables on the president. But at least we had a debate, Anand. It was very good. It was very substantial. We know vast policy difference from energy policy to healthcare to COVID. Anyone who is undecided doesn't have a reason to be so now because the difference between these two candidates is so stark.
Right, Nathan, thank you so much. That's CGTN's Nathan King reporting from the White House. Well, to talk about the debate, let's bring in our panel. Joining us from North Carolina is Mary C. Curtis. She's a columnist for the political publication Roll Call and the host of the Equal Time podcast. Also with us from Maryland via Skype is Joel Rubin. He's a Democratic strategist and president of the Washington Strategy Group. From New York, Amy Holmes is a writer for HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher and a political columnist. And from South Carolina, Eric Bolling is a political commentator and host of America This Week. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being with us. Eric, as we just heard, this was a relatively civil debate compared to the first one. But let's look at the situation right now for Donald Trump. He's trailing in the polls, and by some accounts, this was his last chance to make his case to the American people. Did he succeed?
I think you hit it on the head, Arnon, when you said, did it move the needle? It probably didn't move the needle. It was entertaining. 57+ million people watched it. But I will tell you, this exact time, with 12 days out in 2016, Hillary Clinton had leads, had probably wider leads in most of the swing states. No one saw Donald Trump winning. I paid little attention to the polls. What mattered last night, I believe, and I've said this, I was on media all day today, I believe Joe Biden committed political suicide last night at that debate when he said that he was going to eliminate the fossil fuel industry. At first, he said by 2025. He pushed it back a decade, by 2035, if he were president. I believe people in Pennsylvania who are struggling in the midst of a pandemic, trying to get back to normalcy, trying to get back to work, who are struggling economically. A lot of people struggling in the country economically due to COVID. I think most of those people, 9 million energy sector jobs would be eliminated. 9 million of the highest paying jobs in this country would be eliminated under Joe Biden's presidency. If that's what he meant, if you take the man for his word, this man lost Pennsylvania last night, thereby lost the election.
Joel Rubin, what do you make of that? Did Joe Biden commit political suicide by saying that he will get rid of fossil fuel jobs?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's a bit of an overstretch to say that one comment that clearly is taken out of context and is not accurate, even the way it's being portrayed right now by Eric.
Out of context,
somehow
Joel.
Political suicide.
Just out of context, really.
The fact is, Eric, is that Joe Biden is clear. He is not opposed to fracking. He is also clear that he is about ending extraction on federal lands. And he also is clear that climate change actually is a threat to the United States and the world, and we have to get on it and start moving to industries that help us prevent climate change from going further.
One moment, Eric. I'll get back to you.
I apologize, but for God's sake, to say clear, the man has been all over the
Eric,
wall.
Eric, I will get back to you.
10 years saying
Eric,
he would eliminate
I'm
fracking.
responding with substance. I'm responding with substance.
Clear.
Now, the thing is that when it comes to winning Pennsylvania, it's clear that Donald Trump is worried about Joe Biden, constantly mocking him as not being from Scranton, which he is. And he also is from next state. He grew up in Delaware, adjacent to Pennsylvania. So Trump is worried. And in Pennsylvania, Vice President Biden is up by a couple of points. Yeah. I do agree that it's going to be a close election. I do agree that polls never tell the full story. But certainly last night, there are a lot of things Donald Trump said as well that are very damaging to his prospects.
All right, Amy Holmes, the opening salvos in this debate was about the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, many analysts believe that this election is going to be a referendum on Donald Trump's handling of the pandemic, of this viral outbreak. Right from the beginning, Joe Biden went for the jugular. He cited those 220 deaths and said anyone responsible for that amount of death should not remain president. We heard that at the beginning of the show. Did that hurt Trump?
Well, the polling shows that the economy is actually the #1 issue for voters, but with COVID as second on the list. We know that Democrats are focusing on COVID because that is their strongest suit. That is the sledgehammer. I thought that the vice president kind of sounded like the Grim Reaper when this debate first opened and saying we're death, death, death over and over. We're going to live with death. And you're going to wake up with the person you love dead tomorrow morning. That was certainly a bit of hyperbole on his part. And a new New York Times piece finds that the death rate for COVID-19 is actually going down, that there is some good news that we're getting about
Amy, I'm just wondering if that is...
You want to make a political point or about this issue for Donald Trump, is that the coronavirus, COVID-19, is an enormously huge issue for suburban white women. and that has turned his handling of it and his press conferences, or when he stands with his doctors, that have been, I would say, oftentimes chaotic and contradictory.
Yeah.
That his approach has hurt him with this very vital constituency, and we're going to have to see if he can make up for that by being able to appeal to other voters for whom COVID-19 is not such a central focus.
Amy, just on that point about the number of deaths, you say it's good news, but we had a report out of Columbia University which says that if this was handled in a different way, at least 130,000 deaths could have been avoided.
Well, Anand, you know as well as I do that at the beginning of this, there was a lot of fog of war, of even understanding how this virus worked. In the beginning, we had these projections of infections and deaths that were absolutely off the charts, wrong, did not come to fruition. Dr. Fauci said initially, don't worry about wearing a mask, then even moved to wearing a mask. I think in the beginning that there was a lot of contradictory information, even from the experts, the scientists, that it turned out that their modeling on coronavirus was not correct. And there were different approaches to the virus in different places. So we know
we're at peak infection right now. We just had our worst day of infection yet.
Okay, one moment, Joel.
Retirement center. And that turned out to be disastrous. But of course, the media does not want to report. Well, I'll give the New York Times, a benefit here.
Yeah.
There is new information out about how this virus works, and we need to take that into account as well.
All right, let me go to Mary C. Curtis. Mary, on COVID, Biden said that he will follow the science, he will follow the advice of medical experts, but when pressed on how he would handle any kind of hostility from red states, these are Republican states in the United States, and look, whether we like it or not, there is a political dimension to this pandemic. He said he doesn't see red states or blue states, he sees the United States. I mean, it's a bit of a throwaway line. It was first used by President Obama in when he became president. So how would he handle the pandemic politically if elected? Because, as I said, whether we like it or not, there is the politics of this that he has to deal with.
Yeah, it's been unfortunate that the very wearing of masks has become a political statement. Just not too long ago, Donald Trump had a rally in Gastonia, North Carolina, with 15,000 folks, no social distancing, and not a lot of mask wearing. But the thing of it is Joe Biden has talked about the COVID relief bills, that some of them are being held up in the Senate because they do give aid to some of the workers in the states and the cities, frontline workers, police officers, firefighters. And some of the Republican senators have characterized it as a blue state bailout. So when he says that he does see not red or blue states, I think he's looking at the fact that while some of the blue states were early on seeing a lot of the deaths from COVID, now there are spikes in a lot of the Midwestern states. And so even some of these states that did vote for Trump, as Joel said, we just had a high of over 80,000 cases, and you do see people worried about it, and it's coming to them. They're also seeing it in the schools opening and closing, and the fact that the vaccine doesn't seem to be coming for a while, which is something that President Trump has been touting. So he can turn to the fact that they aren't getting the relief, the businesses aren't getting the relief, they're not giving the money for schools to safely reopen. So I do think that that is something, as much as the president would say he'd like to see it disappear, and of course he got over COVID, but he got treatment that everyday folks are not able to get. And this also bleeds into the issue, of health care and the insurance that everyday people have when they're trying to fight the disease.
Joel, there was quite a long and fiery exchange on immigration, particularly on the separation and detention of children in cages. We have since learned that the parents of 500 of those children cannot be found. Let's listen to some of that.
Children are brought here by coyotes and lots of bad people, cartels, and they're brought here, and they used to use them to get into our country. We now have as strong a border as we've ever had. We're over 400 miles of brand new wall.
These 500 plus kids came with parents. They separated them at the border to make it a disincentive to come to begin with. real tough. We're really strong. And guess what? They cannot, it's not coyotes didn't bring them over. Their parents were with them. They got separated from their parents. And it makes us a laughing stock and violates every notion of who we are as a nation.
So, Joel, as we can hear there, that was a passionate debate there, and I'm not sure how it impacts the election. But who won that argument? Because Trump repeatedly pointed out that the detention and caging of children was actually started by Barack Obama, under whom Joe Biden served as vice president.
Right. No, I'm really glad you brought this up because it's a false attack. Cages were created to find temporary housing for young migrant children. I was in the Obama administration at the time, who were fleeing Central America, and they were not used for separating families and separating children from their parents. And this is not just an inhumane human rights violation and deeply disconcerting to imagine that children were separated by the U.S. government and we can't find their parents. It's also another demonstration of cataclysmic mismanagement by the Trump administration. How could they not know who the parents are of these children? How could they not track them and maintain focus to ensure that they were reunited? This just speaks to the depravity of the morality of this policy on immigration. Coyotes were not bringing these children up. These were children who went up with their parents because their parents went up and brought them there, and we separated them. It's a very dangerous, very sad dynamic, and it's not what the Obama administration did. And I really think that there needs to be an accounting for this.
Eric, what are your thoughts
and
on that?
At one point, he said, too, that, and the places they were staying, it was so clean, it was so nice, as though that would make up for being separated from your parents.
Right. Eric, what were your thoughts on that part of the debate?
Very quickly, can I just, Amy is so right. I'm just going to correct Joel and Mary's math. Yes, cases are going up, but the death rate, the actual deaths, which really matter, are flat, completely flat. That means the mortality rate is plummeting, and that's good news, and that's a great sign. So let's get back to the immigration.
Doesn't give me comfort.
Well,
Okay,
we don't know the long-term effects of it. We don't know the
long-term
long-term effects of it, though, at this point.
Of course we do. All that matters, Mary, the only thing that matters is how many people die, not how many cases there are. It matters how many people die. That's flat to going down, and that's a mortality.
That's just not true.
That's going down. The reason why cases are going up is because we have multiple millions, tens of millions of tests that are out in the street happening.
It's because we have
no
plan to prevent it.
All right, Eric, I want to get back to the immigration question.
You know, there are smarter people in the audience that can do the math on their own to know that Amy and I are right on this, and you guys are playing politics with the numbers and wrong.
Thank you for calling me stupid.
Eric, very quickly. Very quickly on the immigration debate.
These are policies under Obama that President Trump is continuing. There was a study put out, actual number put out in the last week or so that showed somewhere around 80% of the children separated from their parents had no DNA sharing whatsoever. They're not children of these people bringing them over. They may be friends or relatives, but they're certainly not parent-child.
But Eric, you know,
that's the real
Eric, President Trump has been using disparaging names for Mexicans ever since he came to office. He's tried to impose a Muslim ban. He's authorized ICE to carry out these raids in the middle of the night on families. Is this a losing issue for him? Eric, quickly.
It's a winning issue with his base. I think it's probably not a winning issue with the undecideds. I'll give you that. He's hardcore on immigration. His base loves it. It won't move the needle for undecideds, which is what he desperately needs right now.
Well, it certainly will mobilize the Latino vote in states like Texas and potentially in Florida as well, though less so.
But Mary, one point, you know, Biden said Trump's immigration crackdown is un-American. That was the term he used. But if you look at the numbers, Obama and Biden deported far more people in their first term, in the first 4 years, than Trump did in his first term. In fact, Obama at that time was known as the deporter-in-chief.
Deporter-in-chief. Yes, it's true he did deport quite a few and was known as the deporter-in-chief, but they did go by, as Trump brought up later in the debate, those courts when folks had came in with their families, they would let them stay on this side of the border until their case made its way through, and they would give them the date to come back. And Trump in the debate said nobody came back except the low IQ people, where in reality, most of the people, if you look at the studies, did come back for their cases to be heard. So that really wasn't true either.
Amy, I just want to get your view on this very quickly. Let's talk about immigration. Is it an election issue? Do people really worry about this, voters?
Well, the immigration issue is not, it's not just one thing. And so it depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about border security, that tends to be very popular across the board. Maybe not in Washington, D.C., where everybody seems to be so political they can't come together. When I worked for Bill Frist, when he was Senate Majority Leader, and George Bush was president, they worked very hard to try to get a comprehensive immigration deal.
Right.
They could not one because the Democrats were blocking it. Then you have Obama and Biden in the White House, and again, you cannot put it together because there are just too many moving parts and too many people with their own constituency and what they want, their own outcome. What I will say about the immigration issue is that with 12 days to go, I don't think that is the number one issue that voters care about. And in fact, there's not like a uniform position on this in the Latino community. It depends on who you're talking about. And interestingly enough, even with President Trump's very hot rhetoric about this 4 years ago, he did better than milquetoast Mitt Romney did with the Latino vote. And right now, there's a lot of concern among Democrats that Joe Biden is not doing as well as he should be with the Latino community. So again, I don't think immigration is the number one issue here. I think it's a little off track. And
I agree.
All right.
Kind of goes to, however, a criticism that I have of the debate last night and the first one, which is it was focused on topics that are of concern to the media and the Democratic Party primarily, and framed in ways that put the president on defense and put his challenger on the offense. And so right now we're in the silly season. Donald Trump, when Democrats, Donald Trump can do no right. For Republicans, Joe Biden, he's a socialist.
But immigration was his signature issue, and I don't think that's playing into the Democrats' hand. That's giving him a softball, apparently.
All right, I want to move on to another issue right now. Eric, race is playing a big issue in this election, and we saw it on display again in this debate. Let's listen.
I am the least racist person. I can't even see the audience because it's so dark, but I don't care who's in the audience. I'm the least racist person in this room.
Abraham Lincoln here is one of the most racist presidents we've had in modern history. He pours fuel on every single racist fire, every single one. He started off his campaign coming down the escalator saying he's going to get rid of those Mexican rapists. He's banned Muslims because they're Muslims. He has moved around and made everything worse across the board.
Eric, this is a president who initially refused to condemn white supremacists, who said after the violence we saw in Charlottesville and Virginia that there were fine people on both sides. And look, let's face it, he needs black and brown votes in this election. Is he going to get it?
Arnon, I've been on this show and I've said this is a mistake on his part. He needs to condemn white supremacy, white nationalists, all that, and he hasn't. For some reason, it fires up his base. I will tell you that race is a win for Donald Trump, and here's how. Last night, Trump nailed Biden by saying this. Well, Joe, the '94 crime bill was under your vice presidency with President Clinton. That's a problem that you've been trying to fix, but you've been trying to fix it for the 47 years you've been in Congress, yet you voted for it, you pushed it through when you were a senator. You've had 47 years. What did you do? You were 8 years in the White House. What did you do? You didn't fix it. I think Trump wins that. I do think race will come around in this form. Donald Trump is the law and order president. Now, Donald Trump to win needs suburban women voters. At the end of the day, they may not say that they're going to vote for Trump, but they do want peace and civility on the streets of their suburban homes and their neighborhoods. And whether or not they're going to say they're going to vote for Trump, I think when the push comes to shove, they will vote for him because they know he's the guy that is more likely to keep their neighborhoods peaceful.
Joel, Eric raises some interesting points there, but when it comes to Joe Biden, I mean, Joe Biden did call Trump a racist in that debate. He points to Trump's racism, but he also has some issues of his own, doesn't he? He's made some notable gaffes on race, describing Barack Obama as a nice-looking, bright and clean guy, saying to an African-American radio host that if you don't vote for me, you're not African-American, racial comments about Indian Americans in 7-Eleven stores. I mean, can he really claim the moral high ground in this debate?
Yeah, I think those are asked and answered. First of all, Barack Obama picked him as his vice president Barack Obama's word is pretty good when it comes to race relations. And I saw that in the earlier part of this year when I was working on the Bernie Sanders campaign. And Jim Clyburn, the leading congressman, really the pivotal figure in South Carolina politics, a Black American hero, he endorsed Joe Biden, and he turned that race around. And for Joe Biden, his track record, clearly 47 years of work in public service, is something to be proud of. He's not just a basic politician like we see with Donald Trump, who spent 20 years, 30 years in the media, running, half running, then coming in, claiming he's not involved in politics when he has been for most of his adult life. Joe Biden has a record of service. He fought for these issues. He's been fighting for them. And I think that when you talk to people who look at the way he talks today in 2020, when we have an election 11 days out, he talks in language that actually respects people of color, that actually respects the concerns on racial injustice, on anti-Semitism, on white nationalism, in ways that Donald Trump can't even conceptualize. And I agree with Eric. I don't understand why Donald Trump has a hard time denouncing white supremacy. I don't get it. I'm suspicious of it.
I would also like to jump in here very quickly and say,
I have to say that frankly, as a Jewish American, it's deeply distressing to see that the president doesn't denounce QAnon either.
Okay, go ahead, Mary.
Can I? Yeah, I was just going to say that I think Biden pushed back when he talked about what have you done, and he talked about them reducing the federal prisons by 38,000, giving 1,000 people clemency as opposed to 20 under Trump, and that Jeff Sessions, when he came in as Attorney General, he put a halt on all those consent decrees that the Obama administration had worked out with police departments around the country to actually clean up their practices. And it seems like whenever Trump, he only talks about black people in the context of being in prison or coming to your neighborhoods and marauding. And he uses the example of Cory Booker.
Joe Biden put
I mean, really? I mean, like,
tens of thousands.
Eric, one moment, let Mary finish.
Joe Biden did that.
Cory Booker coming to your neighborhood, and he talks to predominantly white audiences in Minnesota about how they have good genes, and he believes in that, like thoroughbreds. He made his bones politically, saying that Barack Obama wasn't a citizen. I'm sorry. I mean, Trump has no
Mary,
high ground.
We've run out of time.
This.
Mary, I'm sorry. I know there's lots more you want to say, but we've run out of time. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.